Unless you've been in a cave somewhere, there have been some hearings in the news. Personally, I think a lot of this grandstanding, I tell kids that want to get into politics that are in college, don't major in political science, switch your major to theater. That's what a lot of this is about. I mean, I hope and I firmly believe that Kavanaugh is going to be confirmed.
Amen.
I know where our two senators stand on that. They're both yeses. So thank them for that. I don't get a vote on it, but just a quick comment. A lot of people are talking about, this is about Roe v. Wade and the battle's over Roe v. Wade and they don't want Roe v. Wade to be overturned. That is not where the battle is. The battle, if you've seen, is at the states. The states have been fighting this. The states, like our governor and our senator here, have been passing pro-life legislation, state after state, bill after bill. Those bills haven't gone to the Supreme Court yet. A lot of those bills have not been vetted. And both sides are kind of holding their power. Like, why would you want to take this bill to the Supreme Court? Why would you want to challenge it and have it struck down if you support it? Or if you're against the bill, maybe you think you've got a better fight in the state than to take it to the Supreme Court. But that is what this nomination is about. I mean, I would love to overturn Roe v. Wade, but I don't think that's the next fight. The next 3 or 4 fights is going to be, just like they've done with everything this White House has done and the Republican Congress has done. They will try to overturn the smaller victories in the court, and that's what this confirmation is about. So, just keep that in mind, because it's with the 24-hour news cycle, I think they lose sight of the fact that we are winning. We have won. And that gets me to my next introduction. I'm almost tired of winning with this governor. Almost. Let's keep winning. So I can tell you, I've met a lot of governors in the course of this job. They come to D.C., none of them as frequently as Governor Bevin does, to fight for Kentuckians. He is up there, he's talking to the Department of Commerce, he's talking to the Department of the EPA, he knows all these cabinet members on a first name basis, and he is up there fighting for you literally every month. And some of those meetings I'm lucky enough to join with him. And there's no media there, there's no press there. He's not doing it to get attention, he's doing it to make things better for Kentucky. But we're here to talk about pro-life issues today. And I can tell you, after having met these other governors, there is no governor in this country that is more pro-life than Matt Bevin.
Amen.
He's the most pro-life governor that Kentucky has ever had, ever in the history of Kentucky. He signed consequential pro-life legislation, more pro-life legislation than any governor ever has. And that's because Senator Schickel and the representatives here in this room today have put it on his desk. Thank you, Senator Schickel, and all the representatives. But there's another thing about Matt Bevin, and this is what puts him above the other governors. He doesn't just talk the talk. He doesn't just use his pen to sign legislation that way. He walks the walk. Do you realize? I looked this up, and I'm pretty sure this is true. He's got the biggest family to ever occupy the governor's mansion. I mean, I've got 4 kids. He had 5 kids and then adopted 4 more. How do you keep up with that? But that is, for the governor, and I know I'm not supposed to introduce your wife today, but we got to talk about Gwen, and I'm sure you will. She has done so much for families and for keeping families together and for making adoption easier, because they have lived this life. The governor and his wife have lived this life. They don't just talk about it. And this is the other side to the pro-life movement. Every child needs to be taken care of. And it is not the job of the government to do that. They need families to be in. And so when there were children without families, Matt Bevin and Glenna, they opened up their home to provide a family, to be that family for these children who didn't have a family. That's the other part of this pro-life movement. And that is what, frankly, why I have the most respect for Governor Bevin. It's the legislation, it's pushing this issue, it's signing those bills, but it's also, this is the governor that walks the walk. I give you Governor Matt Bevin.
Northern Kentucky, though, can someone bragging about 9 children be looked at with a sense of pity, actually? As in, you did the best you could, but that's okay. It was a good start. I mean it sincerely. It is awesome to meet families with 11, 12, 15, 16 kids, and I'm sure I haven't even hit the top number in this room. But there are many such families among you, and it is a tremendous honor to be with you. I was given as I came in, maybe they noticed I didn't have a tie and thought, this is nice, I'll get to go tie free because there'll probably be some of both, it'll be great. So I was given a tie as I came in, and it's modeled after the license plates in Kentucky, the Choose Life license plate. But I'm actually just gonna, if I see some of you dozing off, I'm just gonna kind of do this, and it'll wake you up. I mean, don't look at it, it could blind you, but it's bold. I will say that. I might just put it there if I see you guys getting a little sleepy on me. But here's what's awesome. How awesome. How many of you in this room have ever seen or have one of these Choose Life license plates? A lot of you. I mean, here's what's amazing. $33,000 every year. $33,000 are raised annually by this license plate that people have the opportunity to pay a few extra dollars to have, to proudly proclaim their love of and respect for and appreciation for human life. But every single cent of that, with no overhead, no administrative costs, goes to the 52, 53 different crisis pregnancy centers around the state. So thank you for those of you who have one. Thank you for those of you who have been participating in that. This is who Kentuckians are. I'm grateful. It's an honor for me to be the governor of a state that values life like this. It really is. I don't have, and I feel bad, I should probably look at, it's always dangerous when you're told you have like an hour to talk to people and you don't have a speech. So it can be really good or bad for all of us here. But in all seriousness, I don't have a prepared speech per se. I have some thoughts of things I want to share. I'm also struck by several things that have been said even as I've been sitting here waiting to come up here. I was struck by just in advance of the invocation, and I don't think it was meant as it came across, but the comment was made that we have a rare opportunity where people of faith and politicians can come together. I don't think it was meant to sound exactly like it did, but I would simply say how awesome that in Kentucky there are politicians who are people of faith. How awesome is that?
Amen. Amen.
Sadly, there are some states where people of faith probably don't want to talk about it. I actually was just in such a state. I flew in today. I was speaking in advance of introducing another governor last night for something where he was being honored related to helping young people after they're born, kids in the foster care system, kids that are slipping through the cracks. Happens to be a northeastern state. The specific one doesn't matter. I'm not trying to pick on the state other than to say that in some places, literally people wear very cautiously any emblem of their faith. Any semblance of it, they try to keep undercover in some respects. And this is part of what I really want to speak to you about today, and especially to the young people in this room. I look around on average, I'm probably about the average age. There's a lot of white hair in this room, a lot of no hair in this room. I've got a little bit of both things going on myself. But here's the reality, there's also a lot of young people in here. There's children on laps, there's teenagers. My wife and children, some of our kids are also off in school, and so some are not with us at the moment, but some are. My wife was hoping to be here with our brood. Most of you, or many of you, have met them. I have 1/9 of my children here today. My son Isaac is here with us. And he's been with me the last couple days, actually. And so, because the nature of my job sometimes pulls me around, I often try to take 1 or 2 children with me, sort of like a rolling civics lesson, but it's also just a chance to pour into them. And really and truly, spend the kind of time together doing things that we don't normally get to. Especially in a house full of women, it's awesome for just 2 dudes to just be hanging out. I'm just saying. I have a wife and 6 teenage daughters, so that's all I'm going to say. And I'm blessed indeed. I mean, truly blessed. I want to say thank you to everybody who made this event possible. You look around this room, this is extraordinary. Thank you to everybody who put everything together, every tablecloth, every chair, every poster, everything. Thank you. Thank you. And I know he was just one of them, and to single them out would be to make a mistake, but I'm going to do it anyway, only because as I said this, I glanced in the far corner of the room, which is where all the people who do stuff always are. They're in the back, they're in the corner, they're somewhere making sure that everything works. But a man who's a member of my team that I'm grateful to know as a friend, as a colleague, and a man who has a passion for human life, Bernie Kunkel, is really incredible. A great man, truly. And in fairness, I will tell you, I don't often do things on Sunday. I really don't. And I didn't when I campaigned. If you remember that, I didn't campaign on Sundays. I don't go typically, in very rare measure, will I go to another church on Sunday. I truly, genuinely believe for a variety of reasons. Spiritual reasons, mental health reasons, and a whole variety of others. That it's good, as God intended, to take a day out. To truly decompress and to think about what it is we've done in the previous 6 and what we'll do in the days ahead, to truly rest. And so I rarely do things on a Sunday, and then often have been asked for a couple years now if I would do this, and Bernie finally wore me down. He wouldn't take no for. And again, it isn't for lack of desire to be here. I couldn't think of a group of people that I would rather be spending a Sunday afternoon with, other than perhaps my immediate family, which is what we typically do. But I want to thank you for all the effort of so many that have made this possible, and the willingness to have me here to be able to speak to you. The words are kind as it relates to things that we've been able to get done. And one of the things over the course of our time here I want to do is give you a little understanding in ways that I don't often have the time or the necessary environment in which to explain to you why it is that I'm pro-life. What is my life story? What is my experience? What has drawn me to this? And I'll be happy to share some of that with you in a moment. But I also want to touch on something. I don't want to make this a political conversation, but I want to make a very, very clear statement. I beg of you to listen to me on this. For those of you who will go to the ballot box in just a month and some change, and for the next time, and the next time, and the next time, there are many issues, as was noted a moment ago. And there are many times when people find themselves torn between this thing and that thing and the other thing. But in all seriousness, if you can't support human life, come on. I mean, really and truly, the most fundamental issue, the respect for human life, and especially in a community like Northern Kentucky. In a community like Northern Kentucky, where there's such appreciation for, respect for, support for, admiration for, and love for human life from conception to natural death. The fact that this is a community that knows this, that embraces this, that has long embodied it, that does in fact fight for this in Frankfort and has fought for it year after year after year, even when it was constantly being rebuffed by previous administrations. Please make sure you know the stance of those individuals that you have the chance to choose to send to Frankfort. Because it really isn't. I was struck by something that Congressman Massie said, which is what brought this to mind. The fact that you had at the time, and we all saw those videos, that we remember thinking this is the truest face of Planned Parenthood that people have ever been able to see. It's not just the disregard for life. The way in which people unapologetically capitalized on the death culture of abortion. And the fact that we were, as a nation, so shocked by this, but the end result of this was not to impugn Planned Parenthood as it should have been when they, in fact, brought this shame upon themselves with this disregard. In reality, and many of you probably know this, what ultimately happened is the people who made those videos and recorded those conversations were federally charged with crimes. And we turned them into the bad guys. We turned them into the people, and the poor victim was Planned Parenthood. But in the face of all that, when this was going on, that only 28 Republicans in the U.S. Congress, out of 265 or whatever the heck it was, 28, 10% were willing to put their name on a piece of paper to their elected leader among their own ranks and say, we're not going to vote for a budget that would fund something that is this reprehensible, in only 1 in 10 Republicans. Now I'm saying Republicans because here's the thing. In this room there are Republicans and there are Democrats. And there are independents and there's libertarians and there's whatever the case might be. There's a variety of different political ideologies. The issue of life is not a political issue, should not be a political issue, should not be a determinant as to whether someone's in this party or not. It should be something supported by everyone. But it's not. It's not. And there are many reasons people worry about where we are. They worry about what's happened to America. They say we've lost our way. We're losing our sight. We're forgetting these Judeo-Christian principles upon which this nation was founded. The very principles that make us the greatest nation on earth. Not only now, but in the history of humanity. How blessed we are to live in the United States of America in the 21st century. But we didn't get here by accident. We're not going to stay here on autopilot. We're here because of these same Judeo-Christian principles that inform our thought process, as they did our founders, who recognized that we were endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, and that these do include the right to life, period. That's something that we should not forget. So when we
Amen.
see that 10% of elected Republicans, we realize the party doesn't matter as it relates to this issue clearly. It really doesn't. What's critical is that you find the man or the woman that will fight for the values that those of you in this room hold. And you would not be in this room on a Sunday afternoon if you did not have respect for our Creator, if you did not have respect for our Savior Jesus Christ, if you did not have respect for the unborn. You would not be in this room. But you've chosen to be here on a stunningly beautiful day when you could have been doing something else, because these things matter to you. How much do they matter to you? Do they matter enough to you to be informed to the degree that you know where people stand? And I will tell you right now, your job is to do the homework. But there are people running as Republicans right now asking to serve you in Frankfurt who do not believe in the support of human life. You should do better than that. You should. And I don't care what party they run under. You don't need to go check a box. Do your homework. Be more informed than that. I would encourage you strongly. Please. I want to speak again to the young people here a bit. I want to encourage you to be bold. I want to encourage you to have a strength of conviction and a sense of urgency, in a sense of strength, the likes of which our society increasingly tells young people and old people alike is somehow off-putting. The irony is the people who are the most bold are the people who truly are looking to undermine the very pillars of our society. Those of faith, those of moral character, are increasingly being told, that's kind of a little old-fashioned, that's awfully personal, that's a little bit insensitive, that's some kind of a phobe. I can't even keep up with all the phobes that exist now, literally. I mean, anytime anyone on the left dislikes something, some other phobe becomes a part of our vernacular, and we now all have to be careful not to be that kind of a phobe. Seriously, come on, stop it with that nonsense. I mean, there is truth to the fact that there is hatred, there is racism, there is divisiveness. No question, there is even now, there has been since the dawn of time, there has been since the Garden of Eden. When sin entered into this world, there became a path down which we've gone that frankly has not ended well for humanity. It's not progressing well in many respects. But our job is to stand firm against that. Our job is to be a counterpoint to that. Our job as parents, our job as people in the faith-based community and non-faith-based community, as civic leaders, as political leaders, our job is to be, as it was noted in the book of Ezekiel, known to many of you, the watchman on the wall. Think about this. We see what's coming. We're here. We're gathered here because we see it. We see this degradation in our society. But as was noted then, I would encourage us to be reminded of again, and that is that the watchman who sees what's coming and doesn't sound the alarm is culpable. Period. It's
Amen.
on us. So whether you are a parent, whether you're a Sunday school teacher, whether you're teaching catechism, whether you're in the pulpit, whether you're in the CEO's position, whether you're an elected official, whatever, you're a scout leader, I don't know, whatever your role might be. If you find a coach, a teacher, anyone who is pouring into the lives of young people, if you are not willing to be bold and unapologetic about the values and the principles, I'm not asking you to proselytize at every turn. For crying out loud, in this room I would bet there's any number of differentiations of denominational belief on any number of things. We have Protestants, we have Catholics, and among even those we have so many different, we have people who like music in church and people who don't like music in church, and we have people who want things in Latin and want them in English. We got all of it. It doesn't matter. You think God cares about that? We spend more time fighting amongst ourselves about things that we largely came up with on our own. And we forget about the fact that there are certain overarching truths and things that matter, not the least of which is the support for human life. Let's think about the things that unite us. Think about our state motto. There's not right over here on this flag. I mean, seriously, I'm going to hold this thing up. You guys can hear me. I got 9 kids. I know you can hear me. I mean, you look at this. I mean, united we stand, divided we fall. This is our state motto. This is it. The sad irony is that we often amongst ourselves as people of faith and people who do respect God and respect others and who do our best in our own imperfect ways to live by the golden rule, we are often the most divisive among ourselves. And we will fight with ourselves and be divided over things that don't matter to the extent that we forget about the things that do matter. Shame on us. So for you young people in this room, be bold. Be bold, but be informed. Be able to articulate why you believe what you believe. Don't simply, well, my parents said X, or their parents said X, or my whatever tells me X. Why do you believe what you believe? The irony between liberals who are very vociferous in their opinions and their belief, and they will wear people down. In Washington, Lord knows we've seen this of late, and the nastiness and the silliness has become to the point that it's almost off-putting. We don't even want to pay attention to it. But it affects real and important and significant things. But here's the thing about liberals. Liberalism often is driven by emotion. It's not driven by facts or logic. It's not driven by financial reality or overarching truths and things of eternal consequence. It's not. It's driven by the emotion in the here and the now. If you want to be a young person who is able to make your way in life, or an older person who continues to make your way in life, or someone who pours into a young person in the way we talked about earlier, you need to be able to articulate and be an apologist for, not to apologize for, but to be an apologist, which is someone who can articulate and explain why you believe what you believe. And you will be amazed at how little it takes. How little it takes for you to defend your faith, your worldview, your appreciation and respect for the sanctity and the dignity of every single human life. It doesn't take a tremendous amount to be able to make the case clearly, cogently, and to change people's minds. You will see it happen in the course of a single conversation. Because most people have the emotion, then they have the anger, then they don't want to talk about it. But if they're still listening after those 3 phases of liberal argument, which is to be emotional, to be angry, and to not want to talk about it anymore, if they're still there having the conversation, You're winning, number one. Number two, you have the ability to transform minds in powerful ways on this issue and others as well. So be bold. I want to back up a little bit, and I want to share a couple of thoughts with you about my life and kind of how I came to this point. People are gracious to say the things that they say about me and my approach, and I seem like I'm willing to do these very things I'm asking of you, and indeed I am. But I'll tell you what, the large reason is because I'm blessed by the life experiences I've had. I know with absolute conviction the things that I'm saying to you, I believe to my core. This isn't something, Lord knows, and any of you who've been around the political front, and many of you have for a long time, these are not the kind of things that are considered good political chatter. They're not. This is not political opportunism. But I'll tell you what, as surely as I answer to the ballot box, as do others who run for office, I am as absolutely confident that I'll answer to my Creator someday. And I'm a whole lot more interested as to what I hear that day than I am on what I hear on any day after an election. I can tell you that right now.
Amen.
Not everybody agrees with me, and that's all right. The point is, maybe it's not all right, but that's reality. My job isn't to beat people over the head, but I'm not going to apologize for what I believe any more than I would expect somebody to apologize for what they believe. But if I do believe what I believe, then it's my responsibility, I believe in many respects, to make the case for what I believe, as it is another person's as well. So I was raised in a fairly large family. Again, by Northern Kentucky standards, this would be like your first 5 years, but I was one of 6 children. And so as one of 6 children, interestingly, the first 4 of us did come along in 5 calendar years, which we were off to a good Northern Kentucky kind of a start, but then my parents faded out. They had them after that 1 every 5 years until they got 6. But I was the second of 6 kids. But in the early 1970s, when the abomination of, which literally, and truly, I use that word not facetiously, not flippantly, Roe v. Wade was an absolute abomination of the Constitution of the United States of America. Really
Amen.
was. And the whole idea that you needed to find, the whole idea that we needed to torture out some kind of ridiculous excuse that even by itself makes no sense. Penumbras and emanations. The penumbras and emanations, what the blazes is that? Nothing. It's gobbledygook is what that is. That's what judges say when they know that the law doesn't support them, so they make stuff up. And that's literally what happened in 1973. Nowhere in the Constitution, by even the farthest stretch of someone's imagination, does the right to kill another human being exist. It doesn't. Period.
Right.
And yet, starting in 1973, this was the law of the land, as we are often told. So too have been other things, by the way. And this idea that, well, we should all, those of us in this room and people who believe, well, we should all keep our mouths shut and, hey, it's been settled. It's the law of the land, and, that's just the way it goes. So too was Dred Scott. And think about this. So too is Dred Scott that said people of color, people who were African American and other minorities were not even human, that they did not count to be counted even in censuses as a full human being, that they were the right to be owned by other human beings. This too was the law of the land. The same Supreme Court determined that to be the case. But guess what? It was rooms full of people like this. It was states run by people like this state and others where they just said, we're not going to take this. They became what were known as abolitionists, and they became abolitionist states and towns and people on underground railroads who simply said, this is reprehensible. It should not exist. Human beings are human beings. They're created in the image of God, regardless of, as was noted before my old Kentucky home, the ethnicity of people doesn't matter. It doesn't. And so, too, there were people who just simply said, we're not getting off of this until we do the right thing. This nation of America can still do the right thing and stop killing unborn children, and I believe that it will. And I think that pendulum is starting to swing back, but our job is to be convicted with such a sense of urgency that we don't take our foot off the gas, that we boldly go forward and demand nothing less. We've got to. But in this early 1970s, 72, 3, 4, as this was coming into law and becoming the law, and there was this sense of what's going on? And I guess, what shucks. One of the very first and most vocal people about how wrong this was my mother. And I'll tell you, it's interesting. My mother didn't grow up in a faith-filled home. She didn't go to church. There was no faith-based background to her life at all. I'll tell you, this is something I've not shared with a lot of people. My mother was a young mother with 3 little kids, a 2-year-old, probably a 3.5, I guess, let me think how old we would have been. Probably like 4, 2, and a newborn at the time this conversation happened. And my mother was in a health food store in Colorado in the 1960s. So if you don't think your faith can make a change in someone's life, my mother, who had never gone to church, had no faith-based background at all, was in a health food store in Colorado in the 1960s where you could get a whole lot of things, but one of them wasn't typically spiritual advice of the type that she was given. But there was a woman that happened to be in there who saw her, and I'm guessing as a mother with a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a newborn, trying to buy peanut butter out of a 50-gallon tub or whatever she was doing, that she was probably looking a little tired, and probably, knowing me, I was probably putting my hand in there and taking it. I mean, seriously, I probably was. I might do that even now, I don't know. But anyway, probably not, but I might. My point being is that here's a woman who saw this tired woman with all these little kids and said, I think this woman needs to hear about the love of Jesus Christ. And you think about that. Now, she could have just said, I hope someone talks to her. I hope somebody prays for her. I'll just say a little prayer for her. It was noted a moment ago, and it's true, the power of prayer is an extraordinary thing. As was noted earlier, we wouldn't be here if we didn't believe it. But again, how badly do you believe it? How much do you believe it? It's an extraordinary thing. But this woman took the time to talk to my mother, to tell her that there is something that you might be seeking and not even know. Turns out that was the case. And then just a few years after that, here's my mother, having just recently become introduced to the whole Judeo-Christian principle that many of us perhaps take for granted. And my father, in like mind after her, and now these 3 little kids, now 4 little kids, and then 5 little kids, actually, right about the time that this was coming into play. And so when this verse first passed, the first Right to Life chapter that was formed where my family lived at that time in northern New Hampshire, which even to this day and even then is a fairly agnostic part of the world. It is. It's just you mind your business, I'll mind mine, and that includes everything, spiritual and otherwise. Just the way it is. Very European in some respects. Maybe because they've been there a long time, I don't know. Not a place where people wear their faith on their sleeve. But my mother realized this is crazy. My mother realized this is insane that we're now saying that we want to kill children in America because it's the law of the land. She was offended by this. So she was one of the first officers in this first chapter, fledgling little chapter, which granted in the early 70s, nobody was really, lining up to thank you for doing things like that. They kind of felt maybe you were embarrassing them a little bit. Didn't want to talk about it too much. Don't talk about it out loud anyway. Talk about it in closed circles where everybody's of like mind. My mother, thank God, not a person who minds sharing her opinion. It's a good thing. I inherited some of that. It's all good. It's all coming out. My point being, my mother's father and all of her grandparents came to Ellis Island from Germany. My mother's like 5'2", so stubborn little German people. Don't mess with them. A lot of Germans up here too, I'm telling you. It's a similar kind of a mindset. But I will say this in all seriousness. How fortunate I was to have been raised by a mother and a father who from the earliest days of my childhood, I understood that life mattered and
Amen.
life was worth defending. And even as a kid, now when you're not small enough kid, you don't really care. As you become an older kid, you start to care what your friends think. You start to worry about whether you're going to be embarrassed by something. My entire life, if there was a parade and there was a Right to Life group, those BEVIN kids were going to be marching in that parade whether they wanted to or not. Being at clinics and being on sidewalks and being vocal was something we were encouraged to do. Again, as I got older, I'm not a person who takes blindly anything. My faith, my positions on things. I'm an intellectually curious person. I read a lot. I do my own homework, but it goes back to what I said earlier. The more you do, so many in this room are familiar with the works of C.S. Lewis, for example. Many of you may have only read some of his works like the Chronicles of Narnia, but some of his other things that he's written, Mere Christianity and Grief Observed and any number of other things, these are brilliant. But Mere Christianity, if you have never read Mere Christianity, M-E-R-E, Christianity, if you have never read that book, this was written as a compilation of radio conversations that he had, because long before it became vogue in America, he had a radio show in England. And C.S. Lewis was a guy who was a die-hard atheist. Not just an agnostic, he was an atheist. Didn't believe in God, didn't believe that there was anything to all this, thought his enlightened mind and his brilliance could find a way to prove that none of this nonsense was needed, and etc., etc. But it was ironic that his great mind that he was blessed with at birth, because someone gave him that opportunity at life, and his desire to use that mind to disprove this thing that he thought others used in some way, shape, or form as a crutch, and his thorough, thoughtful analysis of this, and his conversations that he had as part of his radio program, as he ultimately came from being a skeptic and atheist to the exact opposite side of the equation because of logic and of the fact that he could not disprove the very things he set out to disprove, and in fact convinced himself very thoroughly of quite the opposite. And Mere Christianity is actually a book that compiles many of these things. It's a fantastic read. There was comment made earlier, again, by folks on this stage about the fact that there is evil in the world, and there is. If you want to read another great book by him, and I didn't really come here to talk about C.S. Lewis or books, but I'm on a roll, so I'm going to go. But it's the Screw Tape Letters. If you've never, it's a tiny little book. It's brilliant. Talks about what it takes to get people to be distracted from the things that matter, that evil does exist. And for some people, maybe it's a real big evil. And for someone else, it may just be to sit behind someone in church and make fun of their clothing. Why would they wear that to church? But every one of us can be tempted and torn away from what matters by the smallest or largest of things. And as soon as we think we can't, we're losing. All these things I mentioned to you, because it matters how we're informed. And as I have grown and as I have read, I find myself more convinced than ever of these things that we speak of, in the fact that human life is what it is. And I'll share, perhaps in a moment if time allows, some of the same things as Congressman Massie did about just personal experiences with family. But I want to take you, for you young people especially, how many people in this room are in college at this time? It's a number of you. I mean, mostly on this side. You guys are either early or late or somewhere, maybe you've been there. And here's what I'll say. There's a number of college students in here, especially for you college students. I would say, you of all people, don't be ashamed or afraid to speak up. Because in a world where everybody's been led increasingly to the slaughter, and we're all told to keep our mouths shut,